they lie a lot, they distort reality, they misdirect what's going on, they'll invalidate you, they'll gaslight your experience, they'll blame it on you, they'll turn everything around, they'll manipulate. Hi guys, how's it going? Welcome to Going Dotty. I'm Trace Egan, and in today's video within the Ego series, we're going to be looking at why we will be dealing with the ego within our lives and worlds. So let's get into it. To start off with, when we're dealing and when we're looking at the ego, one thing that we can say is that it's very important to call out and to be able to define exactly what's going on in these toxic relationships and dynamics, because until we can see something as what's going on and until we can validate our experiences, it's very difficult to deal with them. You know, there's this concept within the healing circles. You have to see it in order to be able to heal it. If you can't actually define what's going on within the self or within your world around you, you don't have the basic tools available to be able to work with that, mold that, change that, and evolve that and heal yourself. The next element would be that when we're in a relationship with an ego, it really affects our mental health because of all of the tools that the ego uses at its disposal to gain and garner what it wants in its life and its world. What that means for ourselves is that when you're on the receiving end of this, you're going to be left lacking in all of the basic tools and skills that you need to stay solid and stay sovereign within yourself as a person. Having egos in our life and in our world is very stressful, you know, especially if we can't put a voice to the narration of exactly what's occurring, if we can't put our finger on the pulse, if we can't define exactly these experiences that are happening to us, because a lot of this mechanics, the mechanical structure of what is happening, why it is happening, and the medium through which how it is happening, the energetics of it all, when we can't put our finger on it, when we can't describe exactly, you know, a feeling, a sensation, and when the ego puts on a false face, pretends that it's not doing these things and pretends that these things aren't occurring through gaslighting or invalidation, that can be really detrimental for our mental health, because we don't know what's real or what's not real, especially when all of these things happen in this invisible space that it does occur, but it's not something that we're talking about too much in society or culture at this time. It's very easy to talk down all of the energy, all of the spirituality, all of the healing stuff. And rightly so, you know, if you're in an egotistical mentality, if it suits you not to deal with these things, why would you look at this stuff? Why would you be looking at this information? But the truth is, or perhaps a truth is that we all have an energy body, we all have an energy field, and we all affect each other. And that comes down to something as simple as somebody's intention towards you, how somebody thinks of you in their mind, their head, their mind's eye, their perception of you, their intentions towards you. And this is something that's communicated, yes, through eye contact, through body language, and there are these small elements that we can decipher and we can break down. But another truth potentially we can say is that we're all intuitive beings. We feel the energy of other people. We feel the true motion that's going on behind them and how it affects our lives, our worlds, and our forms. But if energy, if intuition, if this kind of spiritual or the non-physical element of self and life and living isn't something that we can talk about in a solid motion in our lives and in our worlds, our inner lives and our inner worlds, it becomes very difficult to define exactly what's going on, and then it makes it almost impossible to deal with. We have to have a really clear view, a very solid awareness of what's occurring, and we need a solid foundation and a grounding for that. It's very difficult for our mental energy, our mental body health, our thoughts, our thinking system to be able to define what's going on if we don't have a language for it, if we don't have a context. And as always, this is where I would say that energetics comes into it. It becomes very useful to understand yourself as having an energy body, having an energy system, having an energetic grid that moves and operates a certain way. We move within our magnetism of life. We find ourselves drawn towards certain things. We get into the flow of creativity, and these things are all hampered when we are in these detrimental relationships. So when we're really breaking down the detrimental nature of an ego on us as an individual, how it affects us in our lives and in our worlds, as a very primary basis, we can say and we can see that egos are fundamentally, they're very dishonest, they're very untruthful. they lie a lot, they distort reality, they misdirect what's going on, they'll invalidate you, they'll gaslight your experience, they'll blame it on you, they'll turn everything around, they'll manipulate, they'll belittle you and your experience, what you're trying to achieve. They really operate from a place of lack as well. You know, it's always never enough. No matter what you do, no matter how much energy you give to a situation, no matter how much you try to help them, it's never going to fulfill them. And they also don't have any genuine attention or focus, any of those good elements of human relationships to be able to offer to anybody else. Egos don't really have any boundaries, or they have the boundaries that suit them and not necessarily what works for others. They fundamentally don't have a respect for those in their lives and in their worlds, and that is very effective when you're interfacing with somebody who is operating from an egotistical mentality, because it's quite simply like you're not there. It's like you don't exist at all. They see through you, they look behind you, they look around you, they throw things at you, they throw things into your energy field, they pull things from your aura. It can be a very, very stressful situation. And bear in mind that when we're in these stressful situations and moments, that triggers a physical response within the being as well. You know, we know when we're going to panic mode, fight, flight or freeze, you know, when cortisol triggers. And what also happens is when we have these reoccurring patterns in our lives and worlds, whether, let's just say it's from one individual or one relationship, the blueprint, the imprint, and the template of that will find other patterns in our lives and worlds. So from one primary detrimental relationship, we can continue to have all of this very stressful experiences, and they get triggered in other places and spaces within our experience that have not anything necessarily to do with the original, but because of the way our programming works, because of the way our conditioning system operates, because the way that our conscious structure and form holds itself and operates within the world, this is what keeps on happening. It snowballs. What starts off as something small can turn into something very big. So with that in mind, there's a video on the conscious construct and the construct of our mind, and I recommend that you go have a look at that whenever you have a few minutes, because that will really help flesh out that point and make it a little bit clearer. Egos are very much full of false intentions, the false face, the dishonesty, and they can really place an awful lot of pressure on you, your life and your world. You know, egos really don't mind pushing the buttons. They don't mind pressurizing you in your system, and they'll use their magnetism to enclose that around you, to enforce you in that experience, and to then try and pull the resources that they're seeking from away from you. Egos are very mechanical in how they go about things. They're very false in their energy. They'll hold like a fake energy, they'll hold a false interpretation, or they'll misdirect you purposefully in order to get what they want from you, to get you into a position. If you're a trusting person, and if they're virtue signaling that they're one sort of way to get into a certain place, and then once they get there, that's when all of the negative and insidious elements of their nature really comes into being and starts to affect you in your form. They're very measured in what they'll do. They invest and they have an agenda. So it's not a real organic relationship. It's not a natural relationship that you're having. It's very weighted. It's very measured. They'll only give a little in order to later on be able to take a lot. And again, if this is happening in a position of trust within your life or in your world, if this is coming from a place of primary relationship, these are really detrimental conditioning imprints to be receiving, because they're going to stay with you as an individual until you come to the place where you have to deal with that within yourself. Egos get away with having absolutely no awareness of what they're doing. They're in this deep state of unconsciousness, and therefore they're not aware of what they're doing to others, what they're forcing onto others, and what they're truly bringing to the table. They're living within their own subjective, myopic world. They're lost to their own sense of lucidity, their own narratives, their own stories, and therefore, you know, they're very dehumanizing to be around and to be in relationship with. That's a fairly, comprehensive list of an awful lot of the elements that occurs. One of the reasons that I particularly wanted to create this little segment is to really validate for anybody who's experiencing any of these things that these are actually things that are occurring to you. You know, it's very difficult to express these things to other people in our lives and our worlds, Because a lot of this, when it happens, and it happens to the internal being, it happens to the inner self, it happens, to our perception and our inner eye. And sometimes as soon as we vocalize that to somebody else, or when we share our concerns, the energy of that, the texture of that experience changes. We can feel something very keenly in our introverted selves, in our inner world, but then as soon as we say it in the external, it doesn't seem to matter as much, it doesn't seem to be as big of a deal. And this is where we can then invalidate ourselves, because we're not really sure what's going on. So like the video, subscribe, leave a comment to let me know how you're getting on. Thank you so much for your time and consideration and spending this time with me. I really do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you guys again soon.